You wake before the sun does. Not because anyone shakes your shoulder. Not because the overseer shouts at the door. But because for years now your body has learned to rise with the same rhythm as the irrigation wheels that creak through the night. For a brief moment, while the darkness still holds the city, you lie there listening to Babylon breathe. It's subtle, a distant hum, like thousands of quiet thoughts happening at once. Vendors shaping dough for the morning bread, priests lighting the first lamps inside Marduk's temple, guards changing shifts at the processional way. And deep beneath it all, the Euphrates pushing against its banks with the stubborn patience of a god. You inhale. The air is warm even before sunrise. That's Babylon, a city where the heat never truly sleeps. Your mat is thin, your clothes simple, but you're not a slave and not a noble either. Just one of the countless citizens whose name won't appear in a tablet unless you break a law or die in the wrong place. But you do hold something rare, a position in the Hanging Gardens. Most people dream of seeing them once in their life. You see them every day. You rise quietly, wash your face in cool water from a clay bowl, and tie your hair back. Your hands already bear the faint scent of wet soil and crushed leaves. It never fully leaves you anymore. Outside, the sky begins its slow shift into blue. Time to go. You walk through narrow streets where mud brick walls leaning close, as if eavesdropping. A few early risers nod to you. A baker you know raises a hand in greeting, already sweating from the oven fire. Farther along, the city opens up. The processional way stretches before you like a path made for gods rather than humans. Glazed lions watch from the walls, their teeth bared in eternal display. People gossip that Nebuchadnezzar himself wanted this road to look like the spine of a celestial serpent. And when you walk it, you sort of believe it. When you reach the base of the garden structure, the cool shadow it casts feels like a blessing. Even unfinished or repaired parts look far grander than any other building in Babylon. Terraces rise one above another, layers of greenery stacked into the sky. You still remember the first time you saw them. You thought the whole thing might collapse. That stone wasn't supposed to hang in the air like that. Now you know better. Stone obeys engineers. Nature obeys water. And water obeys those who wake early enough. Like you ascend the servant stairs, the ones hidden behind thick columns. They're steep, narrow, built for practicality rather than beauty. Halfway up, you always pause. Not for rest, for the view. Below you sits Babylon, still half asleep, wrapped in morning haze. Beyond the rooftops, the Euphrates cuts through the earth like a shimmering blade. Then you move on. At the top terrace, the world changes. Air grows cooler. Leaves whisper overhead. Birds nest in places where birds have no business nesting. Hanging vines sway from wooden beams, heavy with dew. It always hits you the same way. This place shouldn't exist, but it does. A mountain built by human hands. A forest resting on stone. A dream the king forced the earth to accept. You walk the perimeter, checking the channels that feed the gardens. The water comes from the river, lifted by the massive chain pumps below. The machinery thumps rhythmically, like a giant heart keeping everything alive. You touch the soil of a planter bed, still moist. Good. You do this every morning. Not because anyone orders you to, though someone easily could, but because the gardens feel like a living thing, and you've become one of its caretakers. That'd be why the time the first light spills over the terraces, you're already elbow deep in tasks. Trimming overgrown stems, cleaning the stone paths, checking that the palm trees haven't leaned too far under their own weight, replacing a cracked pot, running fingers across the carved water channels to clear debris. Sometimes you work alone, sometimes with others. This morning, Ninsun joins you. She's small, quick, and has sharper opinions than any gardener you've ever met. You're cutting those vines too generously, she says by way of greeting. You don't look up. You say that about every vine, because you cut them generously every day. You smile despite yourself. She always says things like this. It's her way of caring, about the plants, about the work, maybe even about you. You move aside so she can inspect your work. She crouches, squints, makes a soft, unimpressed sound. and begins adjusting the cuttings. Everything in the gardens is a conversation. Between workers, between water and soil, between plants and stone, between Babylon and the sky. You've learned to listen to all of them. You don't command it. You listen to it. There's a difference. Be why the time the first light spills over the terraces, you're already elbow deep in tasks. Trimming overgrown stems, cleaning the stone paths, checking that the palm trees haven't leaned too far under their own weight, replacing a cracked pot, running fingers across the carved water channels to clear debris. Sometimes you work alone, sometimes with others. This morning, Ninsun joins you. She's small, quick, and has sharper opinions than any gardener you've ever met. You're cutting those vines too generously, she says by way of greeting. You don't look up. You say that about every vine, because you cut them generously every day. You smile despite yourself. She always says things like this. It's her way of caring about the plants, about the work, maybe even about you. You move aside so she can inspect your work. She crouches, squints, makes a soft, unimpressed sound, and begins adjusting the cuttings. Everything in the gardens is a conversation. Between workers, between water and soil, between plants and stone, between Babylon and the sky. You've learned to listen to all of them. Around midday, you step back from your work and wipe your forehead. From the terrace wall, you can see the palace, Nebuchadnezzar's massive home of gilded halls and sharp shadows, standing proudly nearby. You've never been inside. Most people haven't, but you've heard stories. Hallways cool as moonlight, bronze gates etched with beasts, a throne carved with the history of kings. Sometimes, if the king visits the gardens, you see him only from a distance, surrounded by guards, advisors, and priests. He moves through the terraces as though his feet never touch the ground. Rumor says he built this place for his queen, Amytis of Media, so she'd feel less homesick for her mountain homeland. You wonder if that's true, or if it's just a story meant to make the king seem kinder than his tablets describe. Either way, the gardens stand, beautiful, impossible, and you maintain their breath from sunrise to sunset. Be why the time the day truly begins for the rest of Babylon. You've already lived half a life's worth of labor. The sun rises higher. The wind carries the scent of blooming flowers, mixed with river humidity. Your hands ache, but pleasantly. The kind of ache that feels like purpose. This is your morning. Every morning. In the heart of a wonder the world can barely imagine. You descend one level down the terraces, where the air grows heavier and sweeter. The scent changes depending on the season, depending on which plants are thriving. Today it's figs, damp earth, and a faint bitterness from crushed laurel leaves underfoot. You walk slowly because the stones are slick with morning condensation. Vines crawl along the columns like curious creatures. Some of them weren't meant for this climate. They were brought from other lands, Media, Elam, even places farther than you can pronounce. The Queen's nostalgia has become your daily responsibility. People imagine the Hanging Gardens as a paradise where workers stroll lazily among flowers. Those people have never carried 2 amphorae of water up 3 terraces. They've never battled root rot on trees that shouldn't grow above ground. They've never crawled through the irrigation tunnels that sweat heat like the inside of a kiln. You have mid-morning is when you check on the chain pumps. From the upper terraces, you follow a staircase hidden between 2 towering palms. The sound gets louder with each step, the rhythmic clanking of wooden paddles lifting water from the river far below. The machine is simple in design, brutal in execution. A loop of wooden buckets attached to a chain rotates endlessly, powered by laborers inside a massive wheel. They push with their bodies to keep the mechanism turning, step after step, hour after hour. You know some of the men who operate it. Ribadat, whose laugh fills a room. Ilshabeli, who never speaks unless forced. And young Pyre, whose shoulders are too narrow for the job, but whose determination is bigger than the wheel he walks inside. When you lean over the edge of the terrace, you can see them far below, silhouettes inside the wheel, moving like shadows trapped in a circle. You raise a hand in greeting. Only Pyre notices. He lifts one arm mid-step, grin wide despite the sweat pouring down his face. The pumps keep the gardens alive, and the workers keep the pumps alive. Everyone plays their part. You return to the upper levels and begin your daily inspection. That's when you hear it. A faint crack. Not loud enough to panic. Not small enough to ignore. Stone doesn't shift without reason. And up here, even a small change means something much larger. You kneel and run your fingers along the seam between two flagstones. One corner has risen slightly. At first you think it's the heat, but when you press down, the stone gives a little, like something beneath it has grown swollen. That's not good. A clogged water channel, maybe. A root pushing where it shouldn't. Pressure building under the floor. You call Nin-san over. She crouches beside you, frowns deeply, and mutters. Again. Looks like it, you say. I told them that fig tree was too heavy. I told them 3 times. Men never listen. Maybe it's not the tree. Maybe you're wrong. I hope you're wrong, but you're probably not. You lift the stone together, and sure enough, there it is. Water pooling where it shouldn't be. Nin-san sighs so dramatically you almost laugh. Another flood, she says. Another day. You reply. The gardens are beautiful, yes, but maintaining beauty requires a constant war against nature and gravity, against mistakes made years ago by engineers too proud to admit limitations. You fetch a reed mat and begin soaking up the excess. Nin-san clears debris from the drainage channels. Both of you fall into a familiar rhythm. Fixing the gardens is a little like healing a stubborn old man who refuses to stop working. He collapses. You patch him up. He collapses again. You patch him up again. You complain, but secretly you love it. By midday, the sun is a molten white coin hanging overhead. Heat curls off the stone, turning the terraces into a shimmering dreamscape. And that's when you hear footsteps, not the shuffling of workers, but the soft, expensive kind. 3 palace attendants climb into view. Their linen robes are too clean for actual work. Gold-threaded belts glint in the light. Behind them walks a woman whose presence shifts the air around her. You straighten instinctively. It's the queen. She isn't often here. Rumor says her heart aches for mountains and forests far from Babylon's dust. But whenever she visits the gardens, something changes in her face. Not quite joy, but a slight easing of the tightness around her eyes. You and Nin-san bow. The queen stops near the terrace edge, gazing across the horizon. From here, the city stretches endlessly. The towers, the ziggurat, the river bending like a snake through the plains. A kingdom carved from ambition. This place, she whispers, mostly to herself, reminds me of home. One of her attendants gestures toward the western terrace. My lady, the king wishes to ensure the palms here remain tall through summer. Nin-san pokes you discreetly in the ribs. Translation. They should have told us this yesterday. You nod politely. We'll ensure it. You say. The queen doesn't look at you, but she says softly, the gardens are a gift to more than me. They are a gift to the city. Her voice is calm, but something in you stirs. Pride? Responsibility? Maybe both. Because in this moment you realize, you aren't just tending plants. You're tending a symbol. A message carved into the earth saying, Babylon has mastered the impossible, and you're part of the invisible army that keeps that lie, or truth, alive after the queen leaves. You and Nin-san share a long sigh. Then you return to work, because there's always something to fix, something to water, something to lift, something to cut. The sun beats down mercilessly. Your tunic sticks to your skin. Your hands sting where leaves and stone have scraped them raw. But when you lift your head and look across the terraces, you see vines swaying in the hot wind, fountains glittering, petals drifting lazily like colored snow. Even in the heat, the gardens remain unreal. As if you work inside a painting of a late afternoon. Your muscles ache so deeply it feels like the pain has reached your bones. But there's still more to do. Always more. You look over the edge of the terrace. Babylon is now fully awake. Merchants yelling prices, children chasing stray goats, priests chanting at the temple gates. The great ziggurat towers above everything, absorbing the sunlight like a giant altar to the sky. But up here the world feels slower, quieter, more sacred. You take a moment to breathe, just one moment, because evening is coming, and with it, another set of responsibilities. And somehow, that makes the exhaustion feel worth it. By late afternoon, your muscles ache so deeply it feels like the pain has reached your bones. But there's still more to do. Always more. You look over the edge of the terrace. Babylon is now fully awake. Merchants yelling prices, children chasing stray goats, priests chanting at the temple gates. The great ziggurat towers above everything, absorbing the sunlight like a giant altar to the sky. But up here the world feels slower, quieter, more sacred. You take a moment to breathe, just one moment, because evening is coming, and with it, another set of responsibilities. Evening in Babylon is not a time of rest. It's a transformation. As the sun lowers, the color of the city shifts from glaring white to deep gold. Shadows stretch long and thin across the stone courtyard floors. The air cools just enough for breath to feel possible again. Up in the gardens, the change is even more dramatic. Light filters through layered leaves like molten metal poured through a sieve. Palm fronds glow. Vines sparkle where dew begins to form. Flowers open or close depending on their moods and species, each performing their own small rituals. You are standing on the middle terrace when this happens. It's the hour when work becomes meditation. You pick up your tools, slow your movements, and begin the evening cycle. This is the part of the day the gardens love most, and you've learned to love it too. Your first task is fertilizing the planter beds on the eastern side. You carry a basket of crushed reeds, ash, and rich soil mixed earlier in the week. The mixture always reminds you of riverbanks after a storm. You move methodically, not rushing, not dragging your feet. Just the steady pace of someone who knows that the work will outlive them. As you spread the mixture around the base of the trees, you whisper a small apology to each trunk. Not because you're sentimental, though maybe you are, but because the soil on these terraces has to be stretched thin. The gardens eat more nutrients than the earth naturally grants, so you give what you can and hope the plants understand. Above you, a vine shifts suddenly, dropping a petal onto your shoulder. You smile. Sometimes you feel like the gardens answer back. Further down the terrace, you hear voices. The workers who replaced the broken aqueduct stone in the morning have regrouped. They sit on the steps, sharing water and gossip the way others share bread. You join them, wiping sweat from your face. Belitu, the oldest among you, is telling a story again. He claims he once delivered flowers to the king's personal chamber. No one believes him, but the story changes each time, so it never gets boring. And then Nebuchadnezzar looks right at me, he says dramatically, waving his hands, and asks if I watered the royal date palms myself. I say yes, of course, because what kind of fool would tell the king no? The group laughs. Even you chuckle. But behind the laughter is something else, a shared understanding. In Babylon, proximity to the king is dangerous. It means visibility, and visibility means risk. Better to live quietly among plants and stone. You drink from the shared jug, letting the cool water sit in your mouth for a moment before, as the sun sinks further, you move to the outer wall of the top terrace to perform your favorite task, adjusting the vine curtains along the western edge. These vines aren't native to Babylon. They're mountain-born, thirsty, temperamental, and prone to dramatic death if ignored. But when the light hits them from behind, they form a curtain of translucent green. You lift the strands gently, guiding them into place. A breeze dances through them, and you imagine, just for a moment, what the queen must feel when she stands here, looking out and pretending she's home. Some workers think the gardens are only a political symbol. Some think they're a monument to wealth. But you believe they're a kind of love letter. A carved, planted, expensive apology from a king to a queen. And you wonder if she ever sees the people who keep that apology alive. Swallowing. It tastes faintly of clay. That's how you know it's clean. It's nearly sunset when you step back to admire the view. Below, Babylon glows. Torches ignite along the processional way. The Ishtar Gate's blue bricks swallow, and reflect the dying sunlight. Children run between market stalls, where vendors prepare for the night rush. Musicians gather near taverns, their flutes and drums echoing softly upward. The smell of cooking lamb drifts on the breeze. Your stomach growls. This is the moment when you always feel suspended between two worlds. The earthy, wet, breathing world of the gardens, and the noisy, human world of the streets. You belong to both, and neither. Just as you're wrapping up your tasks, a boy runs up the stairs 2 at a time. He's panting so hard you almost think he's being chased. Water overflow in the lower pool, he gasps. Of course there is. You hurry down. When you reach the pool, the problem is obvious. One of the side valves jammed, causing the runoff to overflow into the walkway. A thin river snakes across the tiles. You kneel, press your hand against the wooden lever, and feel the resistance. Stuck. Hold the bucket. You tell the boy. He does. You brace your feet, lean your weight into the lever, and push with slow, steady pressure. The wood groans. Your muscles burn. But finally, a snap, a rush. The valve gives way, redirecting water back into its proper channel. The pool's surface settles. The boy exhales in relief. Thank you, he says, eyes wide. You ruffle his hair. It will jam again. Everything up here does. He laughs nervously. You don't tell him that if the valve ever fails completely, half the terrace could flood and collapse. Some truths are too heavy for young shoulders. By the time the valve is secure again, the sun hits the horizon. Gold becomes orange. Orange becomes rose. Rose fades into violet. The garden's cool. The stone exhales stored heat. Night birds begin their soft chatter. You stand alone on the walkway for a moment, letting the final streaks of sunlight paint your face. This is why you stay. Not for wages. Not for recognition. Not for duty to the king. For this. For the way the gardens feel at dusk, as if you're standing inside a living dream that only a few ever witness. And you think, if there's a heaven on earth, it must smell like wet leaves in Babylon. Night in the hanging gardens is unlike night anywhere else in Babylon. Down in the streets, darkness brings noise. Merchants shout final prices. Taverns fill with heated arguments. Musicians play songs too old to date. Children chase each other through torchlit alleys until their parents drag them inside. Priests chant evening offerings to Marduk. The city pulses with life. But up here night falls like a memory. Shadows pool beneath palm trunks. Moonlight drapes itself over terraces like silk. Water channels gleam as they carry reflections of the stars. You walk slowly through this world on purpose. This is the 1 hour of the day that doesn't demand your strength, your sweat, or your vigilance. This hour asks only that you listen, because the gardens talk at night. Not in words, of course, but in creaks and shifts and the drip of water along stone. You hear roots settling deeper into the engineered soil. You hear vines brushing against each other in the faint breeze. You even hear the hesitant patter of night birds hopping along wooden beams. If the gardens are alive in daylight, then at night they are dreaming. Your evening task begins with the small oil lamps. They're placed throughout the terraces, not for beauty, though the sight is breathtaking, but because the workers need to see where the shadows hide cracks or leaks. You take a torch from the wall, lighting each clay lamp one by one. A warm glow spreads across the terraces, soft and uneven. Light catches on the leaves, making them shimmer like coins. Each flame looks fragile compared to the vast night sky above, but together they hold back the darkness. When the last lamp is lit, you check the dew basins. These shallow clay dishes sit along the edges of the terraces and collect moisture from the night air. In the morning, their gathered droplets will be poured around the more delicate plants, those brought here from colder lands. You run your fingers across one basin. Cool, already forming condensation. Good. The garden survived because no resource is wasted. Not water, not soil, not breath. You sit on a stone step overlooking the lower terraces. Your dinner is simple. Flatbread, figs, a small portion of goat cheese, and a jug of watered beer. The beer is sour, the figs too ripe, But after a day like this, even poor food tastes rich. The moon rises higher. You tilt your head back and breathe deeply. The gardens smell different at night, less earth, more leaf. As if the plants exhale when the sun is gone. You're halfway through your meal when Ninsun approaches. She sits beside you without asking, tearing off a piece of bread from your cloth. "You didn't save me enough," she says. "You're late," you reply. "You should have waited. You should have walked faster." She bumps your shoulder with hers, but she's smiling. It's a small comfort, the kind workers share at the end of exhausting days. For a moment, you both eat in silence. Down below, Babylon flickers like a scattered constellation. Up here, the only light is moon and flame as the night deepens. More workers join you on the steps. Belita, the valve boy, 2 stone masons, a water runner named Shadi. This is the one time of day when rank doesn't matter. Everyone sits in a loose circle, passing a jug of beer and telling stories. Tonight Belita begins with his favorite theme, original creation myths. "You know," he says dramatically, "the gardens were not built by the king." Groans erupt. "Belita, not this again. You told us last week they were built by a river spirit." "No, last time it was a wandering giant." He raises a finger. "That was the week before." Laughter fills the terrace. Even you laugh, though quietly. Belita's stories are absurd, but something about them feels necessary. People work better when they imagine legends growing alongside the vines. Then Shadi speaks up. "I heard they were built for a queen who never smiles." "Does she smile now?" someone asks. Shadi shrugs. "Does any queen ever smile?" The circle chuckles, softer this time. You don't say anything, but you remember the queen's face earlier today. The way she stared at the horizon, as if she were looking for mountains she'd never find. Maybe Shadi's right. Maybe the gardens are less a gift and more a promise that nature can be tamed even when hearts cannot. After the stories fade, the workers drift off one by one. Some return home. Some sleep in quarters nearby. Some climb down the city's stairways back to crowded neighborhoods where even the darkness feels cramped. But you stay for a moment longer. The moon sits low and full, illuminating the terraces in silver. The columns cast long shadows across the stone paths. The highest palms sway softly, catching the night wind like massive hands brushing the air. From where you stand, the gardens look weightless, like they're floating above Babylon, like gravity has agreed to take the night off. You rest your hands on the cool stone wall. Your palms ache in a familiar, comforting way, the ache of usefulness. Something inside you whispers, "If the world ends tomorrow, I will know I tended a wonder." And in a strange way, that makes you feel immortal before you leave. You make one last inspection. You check the western walkway for flooding. You listen for irregular splashes in the irrigation system. You watch the shadows of the vines to spot leaves that have curled oddly, a sign of too much sun or too little water. Everything looks stable. For tonight, at least. You exhale deeply, feeling the day settle into your muscles. The gardens seem to sigh back. Then you turn and begin the walk down the servant stairs. Stone steps cool under your feet. Lamps flicker along the edges. Each flame dances slightly as you pass, as if bowing goodnight. At the bottom, the smell of night-blooming jasmine follows you through the corridor. You glance back one last time. The terraces rise into the darkness like a giant, sleeping creature. Alive, breathing, waiting for you to return at dawn. You wake before the sun, not because you want to. Your body has simply learned that in Babylon, dawn isn't a beginning, it's a warning. Once the sun rises above the walls, the heat will come down like a hammer. Workers who start late don't finish strong. So you rise while the sky is still a dark, bruised blue. Your sleeping quarters are simple. A narrow mat, a clay cup for water, and a wooden chest with a broken hinge. You splash your face with the leftover water. It's warm, but refreshing enough to wake your mind. When you step outside, the air still carries a coolness from the river. A rare mercy. You inhale deeply, letting the freshness settle into your lungs before the day smothers it. The city sprawls before you in layers. Low clay houses clustered like sleeping animals. Narrow alleys running in crooked patterns. Torches sputtering out one by one as morning approaches. Priests already awake, sweeping temple steps. Merchants rolling open wooden shutters. Stray dogs searching for scraps. Babylon is loud, but at this hour it hums rather than roars. And above it all, rising like a silhouette against the faintest sliver of dawn, are the Hanging Gardens. Your destination, your burden, your strange, accidental home. The path to the gardens is a climb through Babylon's shifting moods. First, you pass neighbors preparing for the market. They nod at you with sleepy respect. Garden workers aren't nobles, but they're not ordinary laborers either. People know your hands keep one of the world's wonders alive. That counts for something. Then you walk near the Euphrates. Fishermen are already at work, tossing nets with practiced movements. The sound of water slapping against boats is oddly calming. You cross a wooden bridge toward the royal quarter. Guards watch you from the shadows. You know the rule. Don't stop. Don't stare, don't run. They've seen your face 100 times. But familiarity doesn't soften their grip on their spears. At the top of the incline, the gardens come into view. Not fully, not yet. Instead, you see only the lower terraces. Their silhouettes look like stacked islands in the early light. The sight never gets old. Not even after years. The moment you step onto the first terrace, the atmosphere shifts. Babylon wakes from noise. The gardens wake from silence. The air here is heavier with moisture. Plants exhale in invisible breaths. The quiet trickling of water echoes along channels carved between stones. For a moment, you stand still, not out of laziness, out of ritual. Every morning, you give yourself 3 slow breaths before you begin. You let the gardens settle around you. You let your mind catch up to your body. You listen for anything that sounds wrong. Today, everything sounds right. The machine is awake. Your first tasks are basic but crucial. You check the grapevines along the western railing. Their leaves stretch toward the sky like open palms. Some are yellowing. You make a mental note to trim them later. You lift a clay pot to check its soil. Dry. Too dry for dawn. You call out to a water runner nearby. Add this to the afternoon list. He nods and scribbles on a wax tablet. Next, you examine a patch of imported lilies. They come from the west, from lands across the desert. They need more shade than the native plants. You adjust the woven mat above them to block the harshest sun. Your fingers move without thinking. Your eyes scan automatically. Years of repetition have turned labor into instinct. But that doesn't mean the work feels small. Every adjustment matters. Every leaf tells a story. Every terrace has a personality. Some days, the gardens feel like a stubborn beast. Some days, like a sleeping child. Today, they feel cooperative. From the upper terraces, you hear a familiar rhythm. Wood creaking, ropes tightening, water slapping against stone. The water-lifting mechanism is already running. Huge wheels powered by laborers turn slowly, pulling containers of river water up through a series of pulleys. It's mesmerizing in a strange way, like watching a heartbeat from the inside. The sun finally breaks over the city walls, painting the terraces in warm gold. You squint as the light spreads across the stone columns. The heat hasn't arrived yet, but you feel it approaching. You head toward the central stairway to assist with distributing the first buckets of the day. Your hands grip the wooden handle with practiced strength. The day has officially begun, and you are in the middle of one of humanity's greatest illusions, a lush paradise held together by sweat, rope, stone, and people like you who rise before the sun even considers it. By midday, the sun is ruthless. It crushes the rooftops. It bleaches the clay walls into pale gold. It makes the air shimmer like the city is melting. But the streets of Babylon only grow busier. You step out briefly from the gardens to retrieve fresh tools from the storage yard, and the moment your sandals hit the main street, the noise hits you like a wave. Shouting merchants, bellowing goats, children chasing each other barefoot, priests chanting at the temple steps, vendors beating wooden drums to draw attention to their stalls. Babylon has no quiet center. It has layers, tones, and rhythms, but never silence As you weave through the crowd, you catch glimpses of the morning trade. Baskets of dates stacked like pyramids, jars of honey shining in the sun, pomegranates split open, ruby seeds glittering, pottery arranged in crooked rows, dyed fabrics flapping in the wind, scribes writing letters for people who cannot write. A woman selling fish calls out to you, waving a freshly caught carp. You shake your head with a polite grin. She shrugs and keeps shouting to the next potential buyer. A pair of guards push through the crowd, clearing a path for a noble's litter. People step aside with a blend of respect and irritation. Nobles ride. Everyone else walks. That's the way things are. But you're in an odd place in this hierarchy. Not noble, not poor, not enslaved, not elite. You're a caretaker of wonders, a servant of beauty, a keeper of something the world might remember long after your bones are dust. People don't bow to you, but they notice you. And in Babylon, being noticed is a kind of currency. When you reach the supply shed near the southern wall, the keeper, an old man with a gray beard and the personality of a brick, hands you a bundle of tools without looking up. "You break another trowel," he grumbles. "No," you answer. "Just need sharper blades." He snorts, muttering something about young workers and their weak arms. But he gives you the tools anyway. You've known him for years. He's all bark, no bite. Except on hot days. Then he's all bark and a little bite. As you leave, he calls out, "Tell your overseer we still need the new rope shipment. The last batch snapped like old reeds." You raise a hand to show you heard. You'll relay the message later. Whether the overseer cares is another story. Walking back to the gardens, you pass through a narrow alley shaded by wooden lattices. A group of children run past you, laughing, holding clay balls they made themselves. Their joy is simple, pure, unaffected by politics or kingdoms. A scribe sits cross-legged under an awning, writing receipts for a line of merchants. His reed stylus dances across a clay tablet with elegant precision. Two women argue loudly over the price of sesame oil. A man leads a stubborn donkey through a crowd of irritated buyers. A flute player performs near a well, his melody competing with the market noise. This city is chaos, but it's a living chaos, a creature with 1,000 voices. When you reach the base of the terrace stairs, you pause for a moment just to catch your breath. The noise fades. The air cools. The shade of overhanging vines swallows you whole. It's like crossing a threshold between worlds. Outside is Babylon, hot, loud, relentless. Inside is the green heart of the empire, quiet, precise, balanced. As you step back into the inner walkways, the humidity greets you like an old friend. You inhale deeply, feeling the air grow heavier in your lungs. The upper terraces await. You roll your shoulders, tighten your grip on the new tools, and begin climbing the stairs. Halfway up, you glance back at the city. From up here, Babylon looks like a tapestry, woven, textured, alive. Down there, everyone is trying to survive the day. Up here, you're trying to preserve a miracle. And sometimes you wonder which job is harder. The upper terraces are beautiful, but the parts beneath them? That's where the gardens reveal their true personality. You know this better than anyone. When you reach the maintenance door behind a wall of hanging ivy, you lift the metal latch and slip inside. Instantly, the world shifts. Gone are the leaves, colors, birds, and sunlight. Here, everything smells like damp stone, old water, rope fibers, and clay. You step into narrow corridors, carved between the foundations of the terraces. This is the skeleton of the gardens. Support beams, underground channels, cisterns, rope chambers, water-lifting wheels, drainage shafts, clay pipes, irrigation gates, storage alcoves. It's an entire city of shadow beneath the paradise above. Most visitors never see it. Some nobles don't even believe it exists. But you do. You live half your life down here. A worker meets you in the entryway, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We've got an imbalance on the north side," he says. "Water's not reaching the upper figs. Looks like pressure's dropping in the second channel." You nod. Classic problem. When one part of the system falters, the rest starts behaving like a confused animal. Flow slows. Channels back up. Soil floods. Roots rot. People think the gardens are magic. You know the truth. They're a giant machine pretending to be a forest. And machines break. You follow the worker into a chamber lit by 2 small oil lamps. The shadows flicker across wet walls. The sound of water dripping echoes like impatient footsteps. You kneel beside the stone channel and place your fingertips on its edge. Cold. Still. Wrong. Let's open the lower gate, you say. The worker hesitates. That'll overload the west side. I know. Do it anyway. Better to overwhelm the west for 10 minutes than starve the north all day. He nods and pulls a lever. A distant thump answers him. Slowly. The channel begins to tremble with returning flow. Not perfect, but good enough. For now, you continue deeper, into the main rope chamber, the heart of the water-lifting mechanism. The giant wheels tower above you, each one creaking rhythmically as laborers push them in slow circles. Their bodies glisten with sweat, muscles straining with each rotation. Huge clay buckets rise along a vertical shaft, dragging river water upward. The ropes, thick as your wrist, stretch with every load. You inspect one of the fibers. Frayed, worryingly frayed. You exhale slowly through your nose. If one of these ropes snaps at the wrong moment, let's just say the gardens would not be a quiet place. You call over the rope master. Replace all of these. Today, he frowns. We don't have enough fresh coils. Use what we have. I'll report the shortage. But these go now. He nods reluctantly. Nobody argues with the worker who keeps the terraces alive. Your next stop is the lower cisterns. Huge vaults carved beneath the terraces, storing the extra water needed for midday. Most workers hate this part. It's dark, cramped. Echoes move strangely. Air is thick enough to chew. But you're used to it. You duck under an archway and step into the cistern chamber. Water shimmers below in a still, reflective pool. The ceiling leaks in 3 places, tiny, consistent drips. You kneel and examine one of the drips. The leak wasn't here yesterday. Not a good sign. If the stone begins to erode, water will escape into the foundation, softening the soil. And if the soil weakens, terraces shift. And if terraces shift, you don't finish that thought. Instead, you grab your scraper and start clearing residue from the leak point. The sound echoes like tapping inside a hollow skull. By the time you climb back up toward the terraces, your clothes are damp, your hands smell like rope and clay, and your arms ache from scraping stone. But the moment you step into the sunlight, the whole world changes. Birds chirp. Water flows gently along open channels. Palm fronds sway in the breeze. Figs ripen in hanging baskets. It looks like paradise. Nobody sees the patched leaks, the repaired gates, the reinforced beams. Nobody knows how close things come to failing. People marvel at the beauty. You marvel at the fact that it hasn't collapsed. Sometimes you think the gardens are held together not by ropes, bricks, or water, but by the sheer stubbornness of everyone who works here. Afternoon in Babylon feels like standing inside a furnace. By now the sun is a white disk burning above the city, and even the shadows feel warm. You leave the shelter of the upper terrace walkway to gather supplies from a nearby alcove, and the heat smothers you instantly. Sweat forms on your neck before you even reach the stairs. The city below glows in the midday haze. Clay roofs bleach into a pale gold. Dust hangs in the air like powder shimmering in the light. People walk slower, shoulders slumped, conserving energy. This is when Babylon feels the truest. Raw, exposed, without ornament. And you feel it too. A heaviness in your chest. A reminder that you belong to something much larger than the gardens. You belong to the empire. The central streets are still loud, but not with the morning's chaos. Now the sound is heavier, more deliberate. Vendors shade themselves beneath linen cloths. Children sit in corners, too hot to run. Dogs sleep in the dust. Merchants bargain with softer voices. Farmers from countryside gather near the wells, offering grain, figs, barley, dates. You watch them from above and notice something familiar. Everyone is tired. Everyone is trying. Everyone is carrying an invisible weight. You're not so different from them. Your burden is shaped like vines and stone. Theirs is shaped like taxes, debts, traditions, families. But the ache in the shoulders is the same. Around midday, a group of townspeople gathers in the main square. You hear murmurs drifting upward on the hot wind. New decree. Something about temple repairs. They say the king is planning another construction. More workers needed. More grain taken. Nebuchadnezzar is a distant force in your life. A name carved into clay tablets. A signature at the bottom of orders. A shadow in stories. But his decisions shape everything around you. People fear him. People worship him. People depend on him. And you maintain a wonder he uses to display his power. Sometimes you forget that the gardens aren't just a marvel of engineering. They're a message to the world. Look what Babylon can create. Look what I command. Some days this makes you proud. Other days uneasy. But you work anyway. As the afternoon dulls into a thick yellow haze, you hear temple bells ringing across the city. Priests walk through the streets, chanting hymns to Marduk, Nabu, and Ishtar. Their voices rise and fall like waves rolling toward distant shores. You've heard their stories since childhood. Babylon was chosen by the gods. Nebuchadnezzar rules with divine approval. The gardens were blessed by Ishtar herself. The Euphrates flows because the gods allow it. Misfortune is punishment. Prosperity is reward. Stories can comfort. Stories can control. But you know the underside of beauty. You've seen the rope snap. You've seen the channels break. You've scraped algae off stones that shouldn't leak. Sometimes you wonder if the priests have ever crawled through the foundations of the gardens they worship. You doubt as the heat begins to shift from unbearable to merely awful. You and the other garden workers gather under a shaded stone arch for a short break. Clay bowls circulate, filled with lentils cooked in garlic, dates rolled in sesame, small pieces of salted fish, barley bread, cool water from a fresh jug. You eat slowly, savoring each bite, not because it's luxurious, it's not, but because this is the only quiet moment most of you will have all day. One worker complains about rope shortages. Another curses the humidity in the lower cisterns. Someone mentions a rumor about a festival next month. Someone else wonders if the king will pass through the gardens again. You laugh together, share stories, swap small worries. These are your people. Even if none of you would have chosen this life on your own, you're bound not by blood, but by sweat, soil, and stone. After the meal, you walk to the edge of the terrace and look out across the city. The sun is beginning to slide downward, turning the sky into a pale orange blur. From here, Babylon looks almost unreal, a patchwork of color and movement. Shimmering rooftops, dusty roads, cracks of shadow between buildings, floating banners, dark lines of irrigation canals, the smoke from cooking fires, river boats drifting downstream. You rest your elbows on the warm stone railing and breathe in the view. You are small in this city, a single moving part in a machine of tens of thousands. But somehow, that doesn't bother you. There's a strange peace in being part of something vast, even if it's imperfect, even if it's fragile, even if it might crumble someday. Babylon is an echo that will outlast you. The gardens even more so. But you're here now. You're inside the echo. You're breathing in its sound. And that feels like enough.